Good morning and welcome to our inaugural coffee and conversation event here at YWCA Minneapolis. My name is Chandler Milam and I'm the Director of Individual Giving here at YWCA Minneapolis. This morning we're going to be having Catherine Mahler, one of our ECE site directors, to speak about ECE and what's going on in that field, as well as kind of what she does in her role within the organization. We're going to have this event available via recording as well, so you'll be able to watch it on your own time, share it with friends or anybody else who might be interested in this work as well. This entire event series is just designed to be an opportunity for you to easily access more information about the YWCA and the work that our program staff are doing about the different programs you're passionate about. So I just, without further introduction, want to go ahead and tell you a little bit more about Catherine and kind of turn the stage over to her. So Catherine actually joined the YWCA a little less than 7 years ago. She started at our downtown center as a teacher before becoming the ECE specialist there. She briefly left the YWCA to gain additional leadership experience, and in early 2021 rejoined as our site director at Ecolab. We're very fortunate to have Catherine back, especially as early childhood education has undergone a lot of struggles and transition over the last couple of years dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're thrilled to have her today to talk more about her work and to share with you some of the different opportunities and challenges that she sees. So with that, I'll turn it over to Catherine.
Thank you. So I was born an educator, knew at a very, very young age that education was something that I was really going to be involved in. I was an at-home mom for the early part of my family time, and when my daughter was 5 years old, I decided that I needed to go back to school and support the work that I was doing as a volunteer in the early education. And I was also, originally thought I would do elementary education, went and got a degree, got a teaching license for birth to third grade. And in that setting, for my kids, I was their PTO, the head of the PTO for that school. And something I recognized in those rooms, when we were having those family meetings, the people that were in those meetings speaking on behalf of their children did not match the demographics of the school. So, everybody that was in that room looked the same. And the kids in that school were not all the same. And so my goal started there, to make that room know that they could have a voice in what was happening in that school. And it expanded. My kids were in some programs that were offered, but I found that they were very hard to find. And so again, we had a specific demographic group that was getting access to these programs that were higher quality. And so I really decided there that, this is something that I need to invest myself in, because it wasn't right. And I wanted to know that all of the kids that were in the spaces were being represented equally. So fast forward, I finished my degree, went to my first job was in early education, and it was in a church, and it was learning, but it wasn't me yet. And then I was going through a divorce and came across an ad for the Y. And being in line, I took that first interview, and walking into that building that first day, it was the downtown site, and I was nervous, I was late. And I walked past one of the classrooms, and this guy just was so happy to see me and waved, and I thought, oh, this is who I have my interview with. And he came out and gave me a hug, and it wasn't the person I was there to see. So it brought my level of anxiety down, and I felt like I was at home. And so I started my career there in 2014, and I had what at the time was the Starfish classroom. I was the lead. It was a pre-K classroom, and it was the first time that I really could see what I was doing had an effect on not only the children but the families that we were working with. I felt like, the longer I was there, the more I felt like the YWCA was a little cell of what I want the world to be like. And I feel like, we can actually see what we're doing. A lot of places, organizations still talk about what they're doing, and, they say, oh, we're doing all these great things. With the Y, I could always see what we were doing. I could see the little kids with their vests on, speaking for women's rights, walking down Nicollet Mall. I could see that. And it was really impactful for me. And I recognized that I wasn't only effective with the kids, but I was also really good at working with other staff and the teachers and helping them get to a place where we were really having a solid impact on these kids. And so when the position for education specialist opened up downtown, I took that position thinking, maybe the administrative side was something that I might like. And so when I was in that space, I wanted to get I wanted to get a master's degree, and found a program that could get me the credits for really cheap, and then I could transfer them over. So that was a director's credential program, and I at that time actually had no intention whatsoever of being a director. I just didn't feel like that was something that I'd want to do. There's a lot involved, and so I thought, and besides that, the Y's sites, I mean, there are 100+ kids. It definitely is not a place in my mind for a director to start, So I thought, well, I'm just going to I put out 2 applications, and I put myself in a mind frame. Well, if they offered me this amount of money, maybe I would leave the Y, even though I love it so much, So that amount came through, and so I did. I left for 2 years, and I did leave my retirement funds with the Y. I knew I would be back eventually. We kind of tend to boomerang, I think. But so I went to another site, and very small, 70 kids max, and started my directing career there. And then of course 2020 happened, and my first year of being a director happened when COVID happened. So you put this being in the field and trying to get through that first year, and we have this newness of COVID, and what do we do, and how do we support these families and these kids, and so it was a whirlwind couple of years. But fast forward, then I'm ready to come back to the Y, or I was ready to move. It was another place where I didn't see diversity, and that to me is one of the biggest pieces. I can't work in a place that just has all these kids that look the same, and it's just not me. And so I had contacted Deb, is still the director downtown, and just said, hey, can you write me a letter of recommendation? And she said, well, are you going to apply for Ecolab? And I said, what? So Ecolab had a position open, and I had already interviewed a couple places, had a couple job offers, but had reached out to Stephanie, who I had worked with before, and just said, I really, really want to work at the Y, but I have these other offers and I need to know something now. So, we were able to work it out, and I'm back and we'll be here. But again, it's the specialness of being able to work with an organization that has so much involvement that, we wrap together. We have 5 departments, but they all intertwine. And, just because I'm an ECE doesn't mean I don't know people from the racial justice. We all seem to work together to make our mission a reality. And that's something that really resonates with me. So getting to our actual program, we're able to offer high quality childcare and learning programs. We help children develop their interests and skills by connecting with their peers and building positive behaviors to support their academic success, as well-rounded learners. And in Minnesota, I found a really hard time finding the actual numbers of kindergarten readiness. That across the state, it's kind of a hard thing to find nowadays. But our kids, the kids that come through the Y, are at a 91% age-appropriate development, which means that when they go to kindergarten, they're ready. And that 91%, the percentages that aren't ready are almost always because they have other needs that need to be addressed. So it's, our kids are on a level playing field. If they're here, then they're going to be ready. They're proficient in school readiness standards, which are things like social readiness. Are they socially ready for kindergarten? Are they able to trust others? Are they emotionally ready? So many people focus on the academic side, where early education, it's more about learning to learn. We want to have them ready to be in the setting once they do get to kindergarten. Are they physically ready? Are they able to dress themselves, toilet themselves? Are they linguistically ready? Can they understand directions? Intellectually ready? Can they concentrate for 10 to 15 minutes? Count up to 10 is the data I found said count up to 10, but when I did student teaching in a kindergarten class, we expected 50. So we're talking about skills that aren't even developmentally appropriate for these children, and they've become expectation. So, if we're not getting these kids ready for kindergarten, then we have kids that are starting behind. So when they start behind, you think about something when you're learning and you're trying to catch up. If we're starting at that point with those kids, then they often never catch up. And you have kids that don't like school, that are doing other things, undesirable things often, because they're not being their needs aren't being met. And to catch up, it just doesn't happen. So we want to make sure that we're getting kids ready before they hit the elementary schools. And what pre-K is now is, when I was a kid, that's what kindergarten was. We're just learning how to sit next to our friends in kindergarten. Now we're expecting what used to be expected in first grade. We want them to have those skills, and a lot of them just aren't ready. And so what I found in that kindergarten class when I first was student teaching, about 50% of those kids had been in a setting where they were able to have those early skills taught to them. And the other 50% had none of those skills, if very minimal. And so then you've got these two groups and you've got one classroom. So we're trying to focus on the needs that are extremely different. And those kids just get further and further behind. And I think it's a service, that we really need to provide as a community, not just as an organization, to make sure that these children are getting what they need before we get them to kindergarten. Let's see. So, we could go into the importance of, all these things that we want the kids to know. But I'm going to share just a story of one kid, one kid that we really made a difference for. When I started in the classroom, there was a little boy, he was 3 years old, And this 3-year-old child had gone through more than most of us have in a lifetime. And he was scared. And anytime you would try to do anything with him, if he didn't know you really well, he would try to climb something to get away from you. You know, he had a fight or flight. That's where he existed, in fight or flight. And you know, it was a hard case. And you know, this little kid, you wanted to give him everything, and he wasn't there yet. But we had him in our care for almost 3 years. And in that 3 years, we worked really hard with the family. We worked really hard as a team with this child. We brought in, we had other organizations working with us, and we were able to get that child to a place, and his family to a place where they were successful in kindergarten and moving forward. You know, I to this day still have his report card from kindergarten hanging on my wall, because to me, it's a reminder of, you know, why am I here? You know, that kid that is just really hard. There's always a reason. And there's something going on, and it's our job and our privilege to find what that is, to help serve them in a way that, you know, can get them past that. And it's amazing to see that growth. You know, that you go around and go back to how we have partnerships with other organizations and are able to work together. You know, that particular child was with Fraser, so we would have a half-a-day program where he was going somewhere else, and then he would come to us. And you know, the teamwork that it took with that collaboration, but again, we were able to move forward. And I don't know that he would have, had he not been served in a place that actually put heart into what was being done. Because he wasn't just another little face. He was that child. I'm not going to say any names, obviously, but you know, that he was seen as the person that he was. And you know, how do we support him in growth? So it's a privilege to be able to do that. And not everybody sees those hard kids in that way. And you know, if somebody doesn't see him in that way, then they're often the kids that get left behind. And you know, to me, that's not acceptable. You know, we cannot have children that we just let go because they're harder. So more about the why. So there's a accreditation for people that don't know a lot about early education. Minnesota has a state accreditation program called Parent Aware. It's done on a 4-star basis. And then there's national accreditations like NACE, which is the one we work with, a National Association for the Education of Young Children. And that one is pretty rigorous. It takes a year to be able to qualify for it, and then it's an ongoing process once you have it. You can have Parent Aware, which is the state accreditation, and not have the national accreditation. But if you have the national accreditation, you're automatically a 4-star Parent Aware. So it's much harder to get the national accreditation. Let's see, where are we on time? So then we get to NACE curriculum. The YWCA published a curriculum book last year, anti-bias curriculum for the preschool classroom. So that's a really exciting thing that we've done as an organization in Minneapolis. So that book, it takes what a lot of the other curriculums, they focus on, you know, play or something, you know, they might Montessori, whatever they are, but we've found, science finds that play is the way that children learn. And so we've combined that with the anti-bias piece that makes us special. Then we have the other part that's really nice is when we have kids that are enrolled in our centers, they also get a year of membership for the fitness center. So it brings that family, it's like I said, it's all encompassing. We support them on all levels of family needs. We meet them for their fitness needs. We have programs that offer support for childcare needs, anything that they might be experiencing in life. We have a lot of different programs that support that. So it's with our ECE program, it's not just we're watching kids. We're really supporting the entire family. And we have a lot of partnerships. At Ecolab, we have partnership with the Children's Museum. So if we weren't in a COVID time, we would be able to bring our kiddos to the museum. And it was always great seeing their little orange pennies. They wear these little orange things when they go out into the community, and it's really great to see them interacting with their community. Unfortunately, COVID has made it a harder thing to do, and we're not back to that yet. But in time, I'm sure we will get there. I think that's pretty much everything I have just to blurt. Completely open for questions.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Catherine, for sharing a little bit about your story and then also about kind of what happens within the YWCA ECE structure. I want to first kind of open it up if anybody else has questions. If not, I've got some questions for Catherine, but if anyone else in the call would like to ask questions first, I'll kind of open it up now for that.
I have a question. So Catherine, you have been in this work for a long time. I'm curious, what has been the biggest change? You spoke a lot about, and I have a first grader, so I will be the first to admit what he's doing now in first grade, I think is what I was doing probably in third or maybe even fourth. Like, they are very far ahead of where I was. I'm curious, though, in addition to that, what are some other changes that you've seen in early childhood work, and what do you see on the horizon coming up in the next few years?
Well, unfortunately, one of the biggest changes that I've noticed is the amount of screen time that kids have. A lot of parents will just put a screen in front of their kid, and that's how we're babysitting our children now. And in the school setting, that equals less attention span, instant gratification needs, and so my way to combat that in the setting, in the Y itself, we don't really allow a lot of screen time. We want to have in our older classrooms the ability for kids that don't have the ability to interact with computers and things at home. We want to give them that opportunity, so that we're not supporting a gap in their being able to interact with the technology. But besides that, I don't, as a whole, we don't allow screen time in the classrooms. That's the biggest one. But that's not recent. That's been happening for good 20 years now.
Well, if nobody else has any other questions for you, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about, I know you touched briefly on our anti-bias curriculum, but I was wondering if you could just go into a little bit more detail about what that really looks like and how we sort of incorporate that within the structure of early childhood education to help children have or learn about things that I think have become in recent years, much more capable of being talked about among adults and other individuals. It's become a higher topic of conversation, but how we then kind of translate that to having those difficult conversations with kids and teaching them about these really important issues.
I think the biggest thing is being authentic with them, and for me, when it happens like in a classroom setting, we need to make it acceptable. That's the biggest thing, is that, you know, we can ask questions and it's not going to be something that I'm made fun of for, or, you know, if we're all sitting down and we're looking at our faces, you know, and drawing a picture of our faces, we're recognizing differences, and we're not saying that, hey, that's a, you know, negative difference. We're just recognizing and making it free and available to do that. And answering questions that the children have is a big one, you know, and not making any subject taboo. You know, that might be something that, you know, it is something that we don't really talk about a lot in preschool. And so that might be something that we address with the family and say, hey, this might be a conversation that you want to have. But the biggest thing is that it's so intentional in our sites that it's not like it's just there, you know, that it's not, you know, ooh, we've got a poster of a kid that looks different than us. No, we've used foods that would be from different cultures that we represent in our centers. We put words that, you know, if we have kids in a classroom that speak another language, when we're identifying those things with the written, you know, we're doing that in multiple languages. You know, it's just it's done authentically.
And sort of, I guess, building on that authenticity, you know, especially here in the Twin Cities, where with the killing of George Floyd, a lot of activism and awareness around these issues that maybe had not been thought about by kind of society as a whole on such an introspective level really kind of started to take shape over the last couple of years. Have you seen, you know, do you have children that have been asking more about these kinds of issues since that became more prevalent within their community, or are you seeing any changes in kind of that conversation over those last couple of years?
So kids are very much now, you know, what's happening right now. So yeah, when we had things that were happening, you know, when buildings were being closed, when it was on the news and families were talking about it, then yeah, we did have more of those questions. And, you know, kids will, when they know something, they want you to know that they know. So it might not even be a question rather than a, hey, this happened, you know, and just, you know, I know that happened. That's really hard. You know, is it something you want to talk about? Just giving them the space where they can explore what they are, you know, seeking.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, whatever's happening in the world right now is what they're going to be talking about. You know, they're very much right now. Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned briefly kind of talking about how focusing more on the emotional and mental development of children in addition to kind of that academic rigor that we often think about when we think about kind of standardness and preparedness scores. I was curious, there's a lot of talk about kind of holistic childcare and the importance of that. And I'm just curious kind of what that means to you both now in terms of kind of what you're continuing to do to support children holistically, but also kind of as we move forward. I know you talked about using less screen time and finding more ways to have these kinds of conversations or talk about the awareness that children have. You know, how do you see both the holistic care of the YWCA at the moment, and then how do you see kind of over the next couple of years that growing or continuing to expand?
So one of the things that we do, you know, with our curriculum, we have an enrichment specialist, and that's a person that goes, she's employed by the Y, and she'll go through each center one day of, you know, the week and do something extra that supports the curriculum that we're currently working on. But then she takes that another step further and provides some ideas of things that families can do at home. So it puts that, you know, here, let's continue on this learning that we're doing at school, and let's turn it into something that we're, experiencing at home, and how can we grow on that. But the biggest thing is involving the parents in that learning, and making sure that they know what's happening in school as far as learning, so that they can provide more expansion on that topic, whatever that is, and then like you said before, if there's a topic that might not be as acceptable in school, then the family can expand on that.
Hmm. And could you just kind of talk a little bit about the number of children that are serviced in the YWCA Minneapolis's early childhood education centers kind of on a daily basis? What does that number look like for people who might not be familiar?
So, COVID did a number on all of us. Pre-COVID numbers, we served more than 720 children a year. COVID numbers have, it's been a completely different game. For a while there were no infants, and then as the workforces started to open up, then infants came back. But we are struggling, and in addition to that struggle, the staffing is really hard to find. The field, and I know all the, there's a lot of staffing shortages in many different fields, but full circle, we need our service to be able to support other employers, and have a place for their children to go, so that the workforce can get back to where it was pre-COVID. But yeah, our numbers are definitely lower. This site alone, I think, was at about 110 pre-COVID numbers, and right now we're sitting at 77 children. That is a little bit lower than we had anticipated. Right now, the public schools are really putting a push for having their pre-K programs in-house, and so a lot of them will take and say that the children cannot come to their kindergarten program if they're not in their pre-K program. So some of those, excuse me, some of those children left, and we did not expect that. And I think that's a new challenge that we've had recently. But we're doing partnerships with the communities and the public school systems. So, hopefully that kind of evens out, and it's more of a partnership than a, here, let's take these kids.
Yeah, and I know you just mentioned sort of the changes caused by COVID in terms of the number of children actually in the classroom. As we kind of enter this period of transitioning, I don't want to say back out of the COVID-19 pandemic, because it seems like this is something we'll have to kind of continue to deal with at times with outbreaks and other things. Do you see any sort of long-term consequences or changes that ECE will kind of have to contend with, not only in the short term, but kind of in the many years to come, that either have already changed or seem like they're changing because of what's happened with COVID?
Well, I mean, we've lost some teachers because they're afraid of being close to COVID. I think there are a lot of people that when they were furloughed, not just not just at the Y, but field wise, they didn't come back from being furloughed. So then we're trying to get new people in the field, and I think that a lot of people, when they think about being in ECE, they think, oh, I get to go play with kids, and that'll be so much fun. And then they get into the field, and the reality is it's a lot of work to work with kids, and it's every day is going to be different. So I think that you really have to love what you're doing, and we lose a lot because they don't understand before they get into the field how much work it really is. So I don't, it's a hard question. Will we bounce back? I mean, I'm sure never be the same as it was. We'll have a new normal, but what that looks like, we kind of get to take that ride still.
Well, I had one final question with you, and you just kind of touched on it a little bit there, but it seems like kind of industry-wide within early childhood education, there is a lot of burnout. A lot of teachers are being asked to do a lot. And, you know, as we've talked about, whether it's with all of the kind of difficulties in the community related to COVID or all the trauma that kids have experienced in the last few years with all this kind of upheaval. I'm curious, how do we kind of handle that problem of supporting teachers more or doing more to help reduce the burnout or the stress on teachers? How do we help them, you know, better care for themselves and better support them kind of in this effort, especially when early childhood education is such an important part of that growing up experience for so many kids?
I think the biggest thing for a lot of people is just knowing the importance of what they're doing and feeling appreciated. You know, with my staff, you know, things might not cost money a lot to show appreciation, but just saying, hey, you know, thank you for what you're doing, and what you're doing is so important, and just giving them, you know, being there, listening. A lot of times when I have a teacher that's having a hard time with something, they'll come into the office and just letting it out, you know, feeling that they've been heard, does a lot.
It's really wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
It's the work that, you know, teachers do, especially during this time where education's become more politicized. It definitely seems like it's really important to let teachers know how much of an impact they're making.
Right.
Well, that was all the questions I had, and I just wanted to take another minute here before I wrap up to say thank you so much to you for taking your time to share with us a little bit about your background and what's going on in your field, and then to answer our questions surrounding some of the challenges you're facing as well.
My pleasure. Thank you.